so we can be done orderly. I want to take this time to welcome everyone who is here at the church for worship. And we have a visitor. You've been here before? Yes, I wasn't here at the time.
Regular visitor.
Okay, well, I wasn't here at the time while he was attending as a regular visitor, I've been told. I welcome everyone here. Brother Dennis is not really a visitor. Been here for years now, visiting, been worshiping with us. And I also want to welcome those who are online. Well, he has been visiting with us regularly too. So I see these faces are regular to me, so are not necessarily visitors anymore. We're all in the same fold. I pray and hope that fold is that one fold of the shepherd, Jesus Christ. Now, I want to welcome those who are online. I understand we have probably some 30-something folks online at this time watching and listening. And I was speaking with Pastor earlier before I come to the podium that we have never seen anything of this sort before, where we have our Friday night study being centered upon the Sabbath. And we have our Sabbath morning study, edification, the children's program, the adult Sabbath school, and now I'm going to be speaking on the same subject again. And later on this evening, Pastor will continue on this most important subject, which will bring this world into two camps.
Yes.
Those who serve God and those who serve Him not.
Yes.
My mind, brothers and sisters, is telling me that never before have we seen this subject being dwelt upon on a single weekend. Something must be brewing right around the corner.
Amen. Amen.
And brethren and sisters, above all other times, I believe it is time to awaken sleeping Seventh-day Adventists.
Yes.
For very soon, we shall find ourselves in a vastly different world than we are now living in.
Amen.
What kind of world exactly, you may be asking? Listen carefully, I'm reading from volume 5 of the Testimonies, the kind of world that we are about to enter upon. And you can see it every single day of your lives as it is changing. Page 753. The scenes to be enacted in our world are not even yet dreamed of. This should send shivers down the spine of every solitary Seventh-day Adventist.
Amen.
The scenes to be enacted in our world are not even yet dreamed of. Satan is at work through human agencies. Those who are making an effort to change the Constitution and secure a law enforcing Sunday observance little realize what will be the result. Then come these words: a crisis is just before us. Do you believe that, brethren?
Yes.
A crisis is just before us. To begin our study this morning, I want to draw your attention to the book of Esther. Esther chapter 4.
Yes.
And I just want someone to acknowledge online that you're able to hear us very well here at the church. The moderator can just, very good. Esther chapter 4, I just want us to look at the last portion of that verse. Because there we find a very dramatic statement in the last portion of the verse of Esther 4, verse 14. There it says, "Who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" There is no doubt in my mind, my dear friends, that the book of Esther was recorded in sacred history for our admonition. And in this chapter, we actually read of the plan of the king Ahasuerus to exterminate, to kill every living Jew in the then known world. And from that experience, we know the Word of God and the Spirit of prophecy tells us that the history of the past will be rehearsed as we enter upon the closing stage.
Amen.
And so it means, brothers and sisters, what happened back then is going to take place in our time. And there is an abundance of evidence that we are heading down that path. And so from that experience, we can fully comprehend what is about to happen to every true-hearted Seventh-day Adventist men and women and children. A crisis is just before us. So the question then is, my dear friends online may have not studied or read the story before and is asking, what happened back then? In the book of Esther. Well, to summarize it, you remember there was the man Mordecai, the Sabbath keeper. He had not caused any harm to the man Haman, but he had just simply refused to show a worshipful reverence to him. This led Haman, in his anger, to give a false statement to the king, you recall, who in return issued a decree that the Jews was to be killed in a worldwide massacre upon a given date. You know, the pen of inspiration tells us that Satan was the hidden instigator behind this scheme, and we all know this.
Yeah.
Why? Because if he had his way, he would have rid the earth of every Sabbath keeper. But we serve a great God.
Amen.
Say amen, somebody.
Amen.
And a great ruler above all gods. A God who knows and a God who understands the thoughts of man and angels. Even Satan. And so, knowing beforehand the issue to arise, by his divine providence, God arranged for Esther, a Jew who feared the living God, to be made the queen of Persia. Mordecai, who is a relative of Esther, decided in this crisis to speak with Esther, to speak with the queen Esther, that she may appeal to the monarch king, even though this appeal could cause her her death. Listen again to the words of Mordecai to Esther, and see if these words are actually being framed for you and I today. Who knoweth that you and those who are online listening to this message today are come to the pinnacle of the eternal ages for such a time as this. Who knoweth that God has brought you and I to exist for such a time as this? Both Esther and Mordecai realized that their future and the future of every Sabbath keeper was absolutely hopeless unless God would intervene and work mightily on their behalf. You know, brothers and sisters, that God's commandment keeping people today are seen as who? As Mordecai, who are refusing to do what? To show the same worshipful reverence to an idol Sunday, which we're going to see in the very near future will be demanded by papal authority, the man of sin. Inspiration tells us that Satan will arouse the majority, are you listening?
Yes.
To accept popular customs and traditions, and also to join with the lawless and the vile to destroy Sabbath keepers. Listen carefully, I'm reading from Prophets and Kings, page 605. Prophet says, wealth, genius, and education will combine to cover them with contempt. Persecuting rulers, ministers, and church members will conspire against them. How? She says, with voice and pen, by boast, threats, ridicule. They will seek to overthrow our faith by false misrepresentations and angry appeals. Men will stir up the passions of the people. Notice, my dear brothers and sisters, since these enemies of the truth has known, thus saith the Lord, what will happen? They will bring against the advocates of the true Sabbath oppressive enactments. I continue reading on. Prophets and Kings 606. On this battlefield will be fought the last great conflict in the great battle, the last great conflict in the controversy between truth and error. And then she says, and we are not left to doubt as to the issue. Same issue we've been studying all weekend. Are you ready for this? Do you have any idea what is coming? Brothers and sisters, we do not even have a thought of what is coming. But would you permit me at this time to pull back the prophetic curtain and show you what God has revealed is about to take place?
Yes.
Amen.
605 of great controversy, listen carefully. We are told there that the Sabbath, what?
Sabbath.
The Sabbath will be the great test of loyalty. On 607 of the same book, speaking of the Sunday keeping churches, are these words. They will appeal to the strong arm of civil authority or civil power. And in this work, Papists, that's the Roman Catholic Church, and Protestants will unite. So what these statements are actually saying, brothers and sisters, is that Sabbath keepers will be opposed by both Protestants all across the world and the Roman Catholic Church
Amen.
under the leadership of the men of sin. And this union is developing daily before our eyes. And we know it to be called the ecumenical movement. Forced Sunday worship is the ultimate goal of this movement. Are you listening? So the real question is, why so many of us are asleep? In knowing all of this? This movement, its purpose is to pass a Sunday law, a law which forces Sabbath keeper to worship on Sunday. And Wednesday night I told you that wasn't the only thing. Not only are they trying to force us to worship or keep Sunday sacred, listen to me, brothers and sisters, as I read what the greatest aim is on the page 639 of Great Controversy. Servant of God says, not only will they force us to keep sacred Sunday, but they will compel God's people to profane His Sabbath. Do we really understand what this means? Now I know that there are some who are listening to me online, hopefully not here. There are visitors who don't understand this subject yet. And maybe saying, well, Elder Andrew, how is this going to happen in America? You may be saying, I don't see how that is going to take place because we have what is called a constitution. And the Constitution provides with us absolute protection in regards to worship. Well, let me tell you, brothers and sisters and dear friends all around online land, how it is going to happen. Many years ago, Ellen White tried to awaken God's dear people with these words. When she says, soon we shall be faced with an overwhelming surprise. What is this surprise? Well, brothers and sisters, you are not going to be faced with it after hearing this message today. Because you're going to be forearmed with the knowledge of what is taking place. Soon we will be faced with an overwhelming surprise. Listen carefully what the prophet is talking about. Volume 8 of the Testimonies, page 28. She says, transgression has almost reached its limits. Confusion fills the world. Listen to these words now, brother and sister. She says, and a great terror is soon to come upon all human beings. I'm sure you have remembered Pastor Walker speaking to you in times past and making reference to the ex-Jesuit Malachi Martin. He wrote the book, my brother, called The Keys of This Blood. And in that book, he says that Mary And I put this Mary, you know, it's not really
Right.
the mother of Jesus. But this is who? Satan working through spiritualistic phenomena. Mary had told the Pope that there will come a great cataclysmic event that will bring such terror on this world that the people will arise. Listen to what they will do. Ask the Pope to rule over them. Brothers and sisters, when the devil, in the guise of Mary, says there is terror coming, and when God says through his true end-time prophet that terror is coming, then we had better be awake. Consider with me, my dear friends, very carefully what I'm about to bring to you right now. Because there is no greater alarming prediction in all the spirit of prophecy than the one I'm going to share with you right now. Volume 5 of the Testimony, page 451. And those who have their phones and their gadgets online, you are going to probably want to write some things I'm going to share with you so you can go to see whether these things are so. Volume 5 of the Testimonies, 451, I read. How can these things happen in our country? You ask?
Right.
Servant of God says, our country shall repudiate every principle of its constitution as a Protestant and Republican government. Now, why did the prophet make a statement like this? What does that have to do with the fact that terror is coming and the Sunday law? What does it have to do with it? What, by the way, is a Protestant and Republican government, some may ask? But I don't understand what that is. What is this? Well, to make it short for time purpose, what this really is, it is a church without a pope and a state without a king. Now I'm going to shock you now, my dear friends, with some alarming news. Are you ready for it? Are you ready for it, brethren?
Yes.
Now, what if I told you that this statement from the prophet of the Lord, volume 5 of the Testimonies, has already been fulfilled? I hear absolute silence. What if I have said to you this has already taken place? Did you know, my dear brothers and sisters? Can we keep the line muted? Did you know, my dear friends, that since the year 1955, what year?
1955.
We have been living in a nation which can no longer be considered as a Republican government?
Amen.
You know why? For the United States is now an integral part of the United Nations. which is the New World Order. As a result, the laws of the United States have been changed and have been changing every day to conform with the laws of the United Nations. Well, someone may say, well, I find this very hard to believe. Many people have internet, and if you have your internet opened at this time, you are going to go and read with me, or you can do this, write it down like the Bereans did in times past, and afterwards go and search to see whether these things are so. But now, I'm going to read to you from the Constitution. Article 6. Read it for yourself. You write it down. I know some of you are typing away right now to look at it, and you're going to be shocked. Sister Nicole, you're looking at it, right? Article 6 of the Constitution. Now listen carefully what it says. It says, this Constitution and the laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made, or which shall be made under the authority of the United States, shall become the supreme law of the land. And the judges in every state shall be bound thereby, anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. Very well. We're protected. We're protected. Now, this tells us pretty much in short that our Constitution says if we ever make any treaties with other world powers, they supersede the Constitution. I'm going to repeat that. Read it for yourself, because if we make treaties with any world power, that treaty supersedes the Constitution. The servant of the Lord says in volume 8, page 28, that what? We, this nation, shall repudiate every what? Every principle of its constitution as a Republican and Protestant government. Now I'm going to give you some facts that you can never dispute at this time. In the year 1945, which is some 75 years ago, the United States, under Article 6, which we just read, signed with the United Nations a treaty. This is when President Truman, he was the president, Harry Truman. And he signed the Charter of the United Nations with the advice and consent of the United States Senate. Remember in Article 6, the signing of the Charter of the United States supersedes the Constitution of the United States. Then the men, brothers and sisters who were leading this nation, you know, they felt that, well, they could always use, we can always keep the Constitution because we have what is called the veto power in the United States. We have what is called the veto power. And so listen now. They felt that if there were some new laws that was contrary to our Constitution, then we could veto it, or our veto power could stop it. You have heard about the veto power?
Yes.
But what our leaders overlooked was what was found, and you're going to look at this now in Article 25 of the United Nations Treaty with the United States. This is what they overlooked. Listen what it says. Members of nations agree, and I have it printed up. I can print it off on the printer there and give to those who want to look at it later. Members of nations agree to accept and carry out the decisions of the Security Council in accord with, and notice the words, with the present chapter. Notice the word. It didn't say with this present chapter, but with the present chapter, meaning an ever-present chapter. This implied, brothers and sisters, that there would be other chapter that would follow. You see how tricky the enemy is with the present chapter. So since the veto power proved to be an hindrance to what the New World Order government was determined to attain, a way had to be found to circumvent the veto power of the United States. So what did they do to circumvent this? What did they do? In the year 1950, the General Assembly met and adopted a new resolution which would do away with the veto power by expanding the power of the General Assembly, making it above the Security Council. Do you see what happened, brothers and sisters? Would you believe it that this government, the United States of America, signed this amended charter as the law of the world, which overrides our Constitution? So now the General Assembly of the United Nations can make any law it chooses if, listen now, 2/3 of the world governments agree, and thus overriding any provisions of our Constitution. Let me tell you what this means, my dear friends. It means that the United States must now ignore, abolish, revise, or even rescind any law of our nation which conflicts with the law of the United Nations. Think of it. In other words, the veto power is no more. If there is a law that conflicts with the law of the United Nations, the veto power is no more. And so today, we are living in America, in an America which is subject to any law which is or will be passed by the United Nations with 2/3 the majority vote. 2/3. And I may remind you, my dear friends, that most of the nations of the world